Today, we are going back to basics and exploring the benefits of turnkey rental properties. Whether you're an experienced investor considering a 1031 exchange or a newcomer to real estate, this episode is packed with valuable information for everyone. I'm Kathy Fettke, and welcome to The Real Wealth Show.
You're listening to The Real Wealth Show with Kathy Fettke, the real estate investor's resource.
Joining me today are Leah Collich, one of our investment counselors at Real Wealth, and my daughter, Krista Fettke. Krista is a new investor, so she'll be asking Leah and me a lot of questions about turnkey properties. Krista, Leah, welcome.
Thank you for having us.
Yes, it's good to be back again.
Oh, I'm excited. It was fun last time. And so, Krista, I'm sure you've got lots of questions. What do you want to start with?
Yeah, my first question is just, what are turnkey rental properties and how do they differ from traditional rental properties?
Ooh, such a great question. I'm going to say that there is no real definition of a turnkey rental property except the one that Real Wealth created. Leah, do you want to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, the term turnkey can be rather misused. Some people can just think that fresh paint makes a property turnkey. We have different expectations as investors. So we coined our term Real Income Property Standards, REAL, and that stands for renovated, evaluated through inspections, appraised, and licensed property management. So we offer this turnkey investment, but we coin our phrase to kind of indicate that it has a standard. And we've kind of defined, like when we are buying a renovated property, what are the minimum requirements that we want to see addressed in a property? For example, like roof, we want to see if the roof is older than 5 years, we would like a new roof put on a turnkey property. All of the major components like HVAC, water heaters, furnaces, we want them to be at the very least serviced and warranted, but ideally they'd be replaced too. So we kind of have a defined standard when we're buying a turnkey property.
Yeah, you have to be really careful. I mean, the idea of turnkey is that you buy a property, you turn the key, I suppose, on the front door, and that's all you ever have to do. It just takes care of itself from there on. But this word turnkey has been used as a marketing tool by a lot of companies over the years. I've told this story before, but I will tell it again, that I went to to check out and vet a turnkey property company. I won't say where, I don't want to hurt anybody's feelings, but when I went to look at the properties, it had that beautiful foreclosure smell, which is like, no, very stinky. Walked in, you couldn't even open the refrigerator. There wasn't a handle on it. It did not look renovated at all. It certainly didn't look move-in ready. So when I asked this turnkey provider, had this been renovated yet? Like, was it ready to sell? And he said, oh yeah, we already have an investor who bought it. Because you'd be shocked at how people will just buy stuff sight unseen. And I just felt so sorry for whoever bought that property and thought they were getting turnkey or never bothered to ask what turnkey meant. So if you're not buying through Real Wealth, that would be the first question I would ask anyone who calls their property turnkey is, what do you mean by that?
Yeah. That's awesome. I feel like I see the term turnkey everywhere, but I love that you guys have your Real Income Property Standards. I feel like that's like a level up, so you know what you're really getting.
Yeah, I mean, ideally as investors, and the trade-off with turnkey, you do tend to pay a premium to have something be fully renovated, right? To not have to put any additional capital into the product. And so you need to Kathy's point, make extra sure that it's worth paying market value for that property. If you, in your due diligence and doing an inspection, you discover things that, will be major expenses in the very near-term future, you should be first and foremost planning for that, but two, probably trying to negotiate with the turnkey operator even to get a better price to reflect that risk that you're taking on by purchasing that property with that deferred maintenance.
Yeah, and so if it has been renovated, which it technically should be, unless it's brand new, then a brand new property is certainly turnkey. But you should still do inspections on a brand new property because sometimes builders miss things too. But on a renovated property, then I highly recommend getting a list of what was renovated and making sure that all those renovations were permitted. There was a group in, Leah, you probably remember, I think it was Chicago, who did turnkey, and they actually did a pretty thorough job, but we found out later they never got that work permitted. And the people who bought those properties ended up having to redo them to get the permits, and it was very difficult to do in Chicago. So if there has been a lot done, and it's not just new carpets and paint, which is technically not turnkey, if there was major work done, that should be permitted, and you need to see proof of that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I'll add one more thing, Kathy, that I learned from you many years ago. You talked about sometimes, turnkey operators can lure in investors by offering kind of gimmicky guarantees, right?
Yeah.
Guaranteeing a tenant, guaranteeing a certain rent price. We're just some of the few that I come to mind immediately, but these gimmicks are sales tactics in some cases. And so investors do need to beware. It can sound like, a risk-free investment to have the tenant already in place and rent's guaranteed. But at the end of the day, you're still buying this property, and they may guarantee that first tenant placement, but what is the rent price really on that property? You always have to verify those things in your due diligence, and don't be lured in by some of those slick marketing pitches that work, honestly.
Yeah. I mean, for those who don't know, this is what we do at Real Wealth. We look for great rental properties for our members to buy, and turnkey rental properties are a great option. And sometimes the companies that offer these turnkey properties, they're not our companies. We just are like a Yelp, so to speak. We find these different companies that offer turnkey, and we vet it initially, and then we have over 80,000 members at Real Wealth, many of whom buy these properties, and we get the inside scoop on how they're actually performing. But we have no control over these companies. So sometimes these companies will offer gimmicks. And within Real Wealth, we say, do we want to offer this or not? I mean, right now, it's been hard to sell. It's a hard time for people to sell because of high interest rates. So they'll offer these gimmicks, but sometimes it's really just a good deal, right? It's just a great thing to negotiate. So what do you approve, Leah, for these types of incentives that either builders or turnkey operators might offer?
Hey, I'm not one to turn down free money. Like if they're offering an incentive that makes it all the more lucrative for you to commit to the deal, I say go for it. But you shouldn't be basing your decisions on these gimmicks.
Yes.
So
yes.
I think it comes down to verifying that their projected rents, or that the rent that they got with the current tenant that's in the property, are on par with market rents. And yeah, just seeing kind of the longer term picture of it, and not letting the gimmicks be the sole reason that you're committing or being pressured into committing to a sale right away.
Such great information. Yeah. If somebody says we're going to give you a rental guarantee, I get it. I would love a rental guarantee too, meaning that if I can't rent my property for what they say it'll rent for, they're going to make up the difference. But what happens after that rental guarantee is gone? Am I not going to get that same rent? Is it not a real rent? So the first thing I would want to do is get rent comps, find out what that property would rent for without a rental guarantee, so that when that guarantee is over, I'm not sitting there with a lot less income than I expected.
Right. The right properties in the right area don't tend to need the guarantees, right? At least not for long.
Yeah, that's true. Part of the question that Krista asked is, how does turnkey differ from traditional rental properties? Leah, how would you answer that one?
Well, I want to share a little bit of my kind of story to get into turnkey, because I feel like it helps explain it. My husband and I were drinking the real estate investing Kool-Aid and wanting to get in the game, and hearing all of the active ways to invest. And we got into that and finding foreclosed properties. And we actually went back to a market that we had some investing experience in long term, and we decided to pick up a foreclosure there. And oversee a light renovation on the property from a very long distance. We were living in Europe at the time, and this property was in Alabama, and we had some contacts there, so it wasn't totally pioneering, in that market. But from a long distance, we were talking with contractors, and the time difference worked to our favor. We'd come home at the end of the night, and we would get on the phone with trades and try to schedule the next person to be in the house to fix it up. And I share this story to share, like, it was successful for us. Like this property that we bought below market value, that we improved, like it rented right away. It was offering decent cash flow. But the whole idea that we had going into it was that we were going to cash out refinance and be able to pull that equity back out that we had forced into that property. And unfortunately, we didn't improve it quite enough to justify a cash out refi. The cost of doing the cash out refi and how much money it would give us, it just didn't really make sense to do at that point. So we decided, okay, we're going to wait and refi this property a little bit later down the road. And then we started really reflecting on our experience. It took a lot of time. It took a lot of energy. In addition to our day jobs, we were coming home and doing this. And then we weren't even able to cash out refinance. So technically, we were under leveraged on this asset. We had the 20% down payment in it to purchase it and all the rehab costs in it. And we sat down and thought, there's got to be a better way to do this where we could be a little more hands off. We could use a little bit better leverage and not have to have quite as much liquidity to get in and out of these properties. And so this is when we frantically started Googling, there has to be someone who specializes in this. And we came into the concept of turnkey investing. And actually, that's how we found Real Wealth at the time. So turnkey for us offered us this solution to be able to be, more hands off and have our capital working harder for us for longer.
I love that story. It's so funny, Leah, because we had an event many years ago when we had a turnkey operator presenting how they find the property. It's usually not in great shape. They fix it up. They are able to fix it up, less expensively than it would be for me because they have all their people working in-house, or they've got trades that they work with and they trust, and they're local. They could oversee the renovation versus, us who are trying to do it out of state, or you out of the country, even harder. So anyway, this turnkey property was kind of talking about how they're able to still get Real Wealth members great deals, but they're already renovated because the team was able to get them so cheap and renovate them for much less than we could. This guy gets up from the back of the room, runs to the front of the room, grabs the mic out of their hand. And I'm freaking out because I don't know what this guy's about to say. And he just grabs the mic and he goes, I'm a real estate agent, and I want to tell you all right now that this is the best thing I've ever seen. I have been trying to renovate a property in Kansas City. I have to fly there. I have to stay in hotels. I have to find the team. I have to oversee the team. I have lost sight of my own business, my own work that I'm supposed to be doing. And I still came in way over this price that they're presenting when I thought I was going to get a great deal. And I spent time and money where I could have saved it. So I was like, I'm so glad that's what he had to say. But that's what people forget is their time. And especially if the property is not nearby, if it's out of state or even just an hour away, that's a lot of time spent trying to do a renovation. If you already have a job, if you don't have a job, you got time. It's okay. But a lot of people are trying to do this on the side, and it is really hard and sometimes more expensive than they expect.
Definitely. I think that people underestimate like the scope of some of the renovation needed on some of these homes. And, you can get in, fortunately for us, we got into a project that it did stay a light rehab, but Lord knows there are projects where you are assuming it's a light rehab and you get inside the walls or you learn something about the plumbing and now you're in tens of thousands of dollars more than what you were planning for. And in many cases, these turnkey properties are really inexpensive homes. So people talk about you're doing this to get that instant equity. And I'm like, well, how much instant equity are you talking about here? Is it one plumbing discovery away from cannibalizing all of that potential instant equity? So I definitely think, it's the who, not how option for real estate investors to stay more passive.
Okay, so from what I've gathered, it sounds like turnkey rental properties are the way to go, at least for what I want. Are the costs and capex associated with turnkey properties similar to other properties?
I would say that initially, in the first few years, if it's a real income property to the standards that we kind of identify, I would say initially your capex and your maintenance costs should be lower than they would be if you purchased a property just straight on the MLS. there's no guarantees for that. Certainly, a home can be fully renovated and there still be issues that are unknown at the time of the renovation. So definitely I wouldn't, this is not a way to have no CapEx or no maintenance. There's still possibilities. But if these items have been fully addressed and there's been an extensive rehab on the property, you get that first tenant placed and, you should have lesser maintenance cost. Now, one thing I will point out about some turnkey properties is that some of them are deep, they're in deep need of renovation when that renovation happens. And sometimes they've been vacant for months, and in some cases, maybe a year. There's been no one living in the home because they've been foreclosed on. And so there are some cases where when you first get a tenant in the house, it's the first person to be living in it, running the sinks all the time, taking showers, utilizing all the appliances. There is the potential for certain issues to be discovered in that first, couple months of having that first tenant. And that's been my experience.
Interesting.
Yeah, and for those who don't know what CapEx means, that's capital expenditures. So basically, Krista, this is the most common mistake. No, I don't want to say the most common, but a common mistake that new investors make is they'll see a property, as Leah said, online. They'll find it on Zillow or something, like, oh, this looks like a great deal. And they'll run the numbers and like, it's going to cost me this much to buy it. And I did the rental comps and it's going to rent for this much. This is fantastic. Do you like this deal? And what they haven't done is looked at what the CapEx might be, the capital expenditures that they might have to face soon or, in a couple of years. So it would be very difficult to just look at a property online and determine how much money you're going to make from it. You don't know how much you're going to have to put into it. So until you've done that and had an inspection done, or if you're an expert at, home repairs and you know how to do an inspection yourself, you could go visit the property and try to figure that out. But if people aren't setting aside that money for the capital expenditures that might come, that's going to be a big shock. And they might not even have the money. If you're a new investor, you might not have that 20 grand sitting around if a pipe explodes or something. So you want to make sure that you really understand the condition of the property before you buy it, especially if you're a new investor.
Okay, that makes sense. And that's really good to know. So how do you go about choosing a market for this type of rental property?
Well, this is where I feel like Real Wealth makes it a little bit easier. We've kind of curated a list of who we think are some of the best turnkey operators in this space. And we have about 15 different markets that we have these relationships, these turnkey providers in. And so we have a bunch of information on our website on realwealth.com where you can kind of learn about the markets and learn some of the economic drivers of the area, and learn some of the return profiles that might make an investor choose one market over another. And we kind of coach you through that process of market selection. But for a lot of investors, it comes down to seeing a market, seeing an area. And we are organizing property tours. We do quite regularly in the different markets where we have these teams. We rent a bus and get a group of Real Wealth investors all together, and we go tour the area. Visit the properties, go look at properties that are in various stages of rehab or construction so we can see how they're keeping the job site. What types of finishes are they, doing on these properties? Then we usually go look at a finished one so you can truly see the final product. I meet the property managers and everything. So those tours are a really great way to get some really solid, good feelings about a particular market and team.
Awesome. Yeah, I've been on some of those tours and they are really great. It's so cool to see the progress and just walk around and imagine yourself living there. I feel like I haven't invested yet, but I feel like if you can imagine a tenant living there and being happy there, then it's probably a good choice. And some of the places we walked around, I definitely felt like I'd be happy living there.
Yeah, if you're interested in finding out about some of those tours, you can go to realwealth.com/tours. I'm going to be on the next Dallas one. So if you're going to be in Dallas the next couple of weeks, I hope you can join us. And that, of course, depends on when you're listening to this podcast. But to get the most upcoming tours, again, realwealth.com/tours.
So what about financing? Is financing the same for a turnkey rental property?
Yeah, financing for turnkey properties is typical. I mean, most investors are using conventional financing. And so they're coming to the deal with 20 or 25% down and usually getting 30-year fixed rate debt on the purchase. One of the benefits of turnkey, as we discussed, is that when you're buying this property at market value, all of the rehab has already been done. But something you've got to keep in mind is that sometimes you're contracting a property before the rehab is complete. And so you might put a property under contract with an earnest money deposit. With our teams, it's usually somewhere between $2,500 and $5,000 earnest money to reserve a property. And then you're waiting until that rehab is totally complete. You're ordering your home inspection, you're ordering an appraisal once everything is done. And then you're closing just with that traditional conventional financing.
And just to explain what conventional financing is, that's the most affordable financing that you can get. It's backed by the government, Fannie Mae or Freddie Mac backed loans. And a lot of people don't understand that you can get up to 10 of these. And generally you're putting down about 20, sometimes 25%. You can get financing on investment property if you don't own a property yet. You don't have to own your primary. Again, a lot of people are confused about this. So Krista, let's say you being from California, you might, when you get married, want to start a family, you might look at the California market and say, wow, I can't afford $1 million tear down here in California. That's like the median home price for, a starter home. So you might say, I'm just going to rent. Like, you want to be in San Diego. You might want to just rent in San Diego and then buy an investment property elsewhere. A lot of people don't understand that you can get financing that way. And you could get up to 10 of those loans through Fannie and Freddie. Leah, do you want to talk a little bit about what a non-conventional loan would look like?
Yeah, so a non-conventional loan can be far more varied, of course. There's far more different lending options. The most common that we see for investment properties is what's called a DSCR loan, a debt service coverage ratio loan. So if you can't qualify for conventional, that's typically, or you already have those 10 loans, as Kathy mentioned, that's usually when you start looking at these loan alternatives. But the DSCR loan is the deal itself is what's qualifying for the loan, not the investor. So these conventional loans have very stringent guidelines about you, the borrower, how much you earn, what your debt to income ratio is, what your credit score is. But these DSCR loans are just looking at the deal itself, and they're looking at, okay, what is the income generating potential of this property? And can it cover the debt costs within their threshold, within their ratio threshold? So the interest rates are a little bit higher on those loans, but they're usually 30-year fixed rates. Sometimes they have prepayment penalties. I've heard it said before that that's when you become a real investor, when you are graduating to the DSCR loans. But it is kind of the inevitable point with most investors who are scaling and growing their portfolios. You eventually can no longer qualify for the conventional, and you have to go into these non-QM loans.
And another way for you as a first-time investor is maybe you find a great turnkey rental property or a brand new property that would make a great rental someday, but you just decide to live in it first. Then you can get primary, you can get the kind of loan that you get on a primary residence, which is the best kind. You'd have to live there for a while, but not forever. And that's another thing that people don't understand is that if you move out, you don't have to get a new loan. You can keep that loan, but you do need to have the intention of living there initially when you get that loan.
That makes sense. Are there any risks or things I should look out for when purchasing a turnkey rental?
Well, I think we talked about it before, like really defining what turnkey means. We've defined it at Real Wealth. So if you're buying through our network, it's going to be pretty clear what you're getting. But anywhere else, again, you have to really understand what they mean by turnkey, have them explain it to you. Because like I said, when I went to visit that turnkey company, investors were just buying stuff sight unseen, not getting inspections. They had no idea what they were getting. They just trusted the person saying it was turnkey without having any clue what that even meant. So, just it's a risky business. That's the best thing I can say. And if you go into it blindly, you're probably going to get burned. Krista, do you remember when we were in Costa Rica and we arrived and I had forgotten to figure out the exchange rate? We went to buy a sandwich and it wasn't a sandwich. It was something delicious from Costa Rica. and I gave $20. And then when we walked out, they started laughing at us. And I was like, I think we just got ripped off, but I don't even know how. I don't even know what the exchange rate is. Do you remember that?
Yeah, I do.
So it's kind of the same in investing. Like if you are just going in blind and you haven't done your homework, there's a better chance for you to get ripped off. Leah, do you have anything that you would add to that of what you've seen people who come to real wealth, kind of like you, who are like, oh, I'm so glad I found you because I did this in the past. What are some of the mistakes people have made?
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the key things that I feel about turnkey property is you have to have realistic expectations about what this is. These are not guaranteed investments. It's still investing. And so even though, turnkey, I think is a great way for someone to get proof of concept in a new market or learn a new area of investing, it's not fail proof. Like you still have to go into it with your eyes wide open. You still have to do good due diligence, trust but verify. We say all the time, just because a team has a really great pitch or a really great sales promotion, you still need to vet not only the property, but the operator too, right? But I really feel strongly that the turnkey model, for so long, I feel like it was kind of the, redheaded stepchild of the real estate investing space. I think people tended to turn their nose up at the idea because it wasn't as active or it wasn't as engaged. And I used this analogy once that I feel like explains kind of the turnkey model, at least in my mind, pretty well. My husband and I are big bike riders, and we would always get on our little Dutch bikes and go for just cruising joyrides and go very long distances. And then my husband suggested that we get e-bikes recently. And we bought e-bikes. And at first I was kind of like, wait a second, an e-bike, you don't burn as many calories. It's not as much exercise as a real bike is. But I relented. We got these e-bikes. And what I have found since having our e-bikes, we're going out more often and we're going a lot further when we go. And I feel like it's very similar to how people might kind of look at turnkey. They might turn their nose up and go, well, you don't make as much equity. You don't get that instant pop in the purchase. But my response to that is with turnkey, I can go further than I would have been able to go doing it on my own. I can do it more often than I could have done when I was doing it on my own. So I think turnkey is kind of the nice e-bike of investing.
Great analogy.
Such a great analogy, because I hear so often, as a new investor, when you're young and when you have time, do the flipping. You'll make more money more quickly, but it still sounds like a lot of work. I still have a job and I don't have as much time as people might think. So I love that analogy. You can go further with the easier way. Right.
Slow and steady. That's how this is done. It's the get rich slow, process, but it is the get rich process, so just very slow, methodical. You don't have to hit a home run on every deal that you jump into, load the bases. And that's how the game is won.
Well, especially if you're looking long term. Krista, you made such a good point that flipping is cool. I think it's cool. I wish I was a flipper. I'm just not, because it's a job. And that's the difference. You can be an investor, or you can create another job for yourself. If you don't have a job, then you should look into flipping, because that could be your job. But if you already have a job, you have to have the capacity to have two jobs if you're going to be a flipper. Because it takes an enormous amount of work. And that's what we do at Real Wealth, is help people who already have a job be able to invest in property. And if you're investing, it tends to be for the long term. So, what do you think this new property or this renovated property will be worth in 5 or 10 or 15 years? This is not quick. This is not a get rich quick situation with buy and hold. It's get rich over time. And so don't get caught up in, I didn't get a $5,000 discount on this property, because if that $250,000 property doubles in value in 15 years, do you care? That you didn't get that discount at the start. It doesn't matter in the end for your ultimate goal, which is wealth. Well, if you want to learn more about Real Wealth's turnkey investment properties, be sure to visit realwealthshow.com. We have launched a brand new website, and if you're ready to invest, you can also book a call with one of our fabulous investment counselors like Leah here on The Real Wealth Show. I'm Kathy Fettke. Thank you, Leah and Krista, so much for being here with me today on The Real Wealth Show.
Thank you for having us.
The views and opinions expressed in this podcast are provided for informational purposes only and should not be construed as an offer to buy or sell any securities or to make or consider any investment or course of action. For more information, go to realwealthshow.com.